I used to believe kindness would always find its way back to me, that giving more meant loving more, that staying generous, no matter how tired I felt, was the right thing to do. Looking back now, I can see how quietly everything was unraveling. But at the time, I thought I was doing what any good daughter, sister, and friend was supposed to do. My name is Mia. I am 30 years old, and I work as a registered nurse. People hear my income and assume I am doing well. $82,000 a year sounds like stability. It sounds like someone who has it figured out. And for a while, I convinced myself that was true. I let the numbers on my pay stub fool me into believing I could stretch myself endlessly without tearing somewhere. Most mornings, before my shifts, I would sit by the small kitchen window in my apartment, sipping cheap coffee. I liked the quiet. No machines beeping, no call lights ringing, no one asking for help. Just stillness. Sometimes my mind wandered to all the people I cared for every day, both at work and in my life. I felt proud of being dependable, of being the one people trusted to show up. My mom often called with little bills that popped up out of nowhere. My sister needed help paying for her son's school projects or repairing her car. My cousin always needed something until his next paycheck. And I always said yes. It felt automatic, like a reflex I never questioned. At work, I was the coworker who brought snacks, who covered shifts, who remembered everyone's birthdays. Nurses joked that if they were ever stranded on the side of the road, I would somehow appear with jumper cables and a warm drink. I laughed along, pretending it did not drain me the way it did. Giving made me feel needed. Needed made me feel valued. There were small joys, too. Patients who held my hand. A baby's giggle echoing through the hallway. The way sunlight sometimes slipped through the blinds during late afternoon shifts. These moments reminded me why I chose this job, why I loved it even when it left me exhausted. But underneath it all, there was a thin thread of fragility pulling tighter each month. My checking account always hovered lower than it should. I told myself it was because I paid bills early or bought groceries for my sister's kids. I ignored the quiet fear that grew each time I checked my balance. One evening, I glanced at my banking app and noticed a number much smaller than I expected. I told myself I must have forgotten a bill or miscalculated something. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was nothing. I did not know then that everything was about to unravel. The first real crack showed up on a Tuesday morning after a long night shift. I remember standing in the grocery store checkout line, half asleep, clutching a small basket with eggs, instant noodles, and a cheap bottle of lotion I needed for my dry hands. Nothing fancy. Nothing unnecessary. Just the basics. When the cashier told me the total, I slid my debit card across without thinking. I was already planning the nap I would take the moment I got home. But then the machine paused. A long pause. Too long. The kind that makes your heart skip even when you pretend it does not. The screen flashed a red message. Declined. At first, I thought maybe the machine glitched. It happens sometimes in hospitals, so I assumed it happened here too. I tried again. Same result. The cashier gave me a sympathetic smile. The kind you give someone when you want to pretend everything is normal, but both of you know it is not. I forced a small laugh. That is strange. Must be my bank. My voice sounded light, almost cheerful, but I could feel heat rising in my face. I stepped aside and used another card, one I rarely touched. It went through. The moment felt harmless on the outside, the kind you shrug off, but inside, something heavy settled in my chest. When I got to my car, I opened my banking app. My stomach dropped. The number staring back at me was lower than anything I expected. Not slightly off, not a small miscalculation. It was nearly empty. Rent was due in a few days. I had a small medical bill reminder waiting in my inbox. My gas tank was less than a quarter full. Payday felt far away. I scrolled through the last week of transactions, hoping to find a mistake. I saw transfer after transfer. 100 to my sister for a school fee she forgot about. 50 to my cousin for his temporary emergency. 70 for my mom's prescription refill. 20 here, 30 there. Tiny things I never questioned. It added up, more than I realized. My phone buzzed. My sister. I already knew what she was calling for. I answered anyway. Her voice was frantic. She needed a little money just until the weekend. My throat tightened. I wanted to say no. I really did, but the word would not leave my mouth. Yeah, I said quietly. I can send it. After I hung up, I sat in my car with my hands resting on the steering wheel. The morning light was soft, but it felt harsh against my eyes. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, not from lack of sleep, but from the realization that something deeper was wrong. I did not want to admit it yet. I was still trying to believe everything would fix itself, that I just needed a good week, that I could always help everyone and still somehow be okay. But deep down, I felt the fear growing. Something was slipping out of my control. The real unraveling happened faster than I expected. It started with a call from my mom early one morning while I was getting ready for another 12-hour shift. I could hear the stress in her voice before she even explained anything. Her electricity bill was overdue again. She said she thought she paid it, but the notice taped to her door said otherwise. She needed help. Just this once. The same phrase I had been hearing for years. I told her I would handle it after work. I did not check my account before agreeing. I did not need to. I already knew there was barely anything left. Before I could even set my phone down, my sister messaged me. Her son needed supplies for a school project he forgot to mention earlier. She was already at the store, waiting for my transfer. A few minutes later, my cousin texted me about his car making a strange sound. He said he could not get to work without fixing it, and asked if I could spot him a little bit. I stared at my phone, a small part of me wanting to throw it across the room. My chest felt tight. I kept thinking, do they not see I am drowning too? But then another familiar voice whispered back, they need you. You are the one who fixes things. At the hospital, the day felt heavier than usual. Every monitor beep seemed louder. Every patient request felt like another weight on my shoulders. In the middle of my shift, I finally checked my bank app again. I had done a few transfers already without thinking. The number staring back at me was not low anymore. It was negative. Overdraft. I froze in the medication room, gripping my phone with both hands. For a long moment, I could not breathe. I had never overdrafted before. I always danced close to the edge, but I never fell. Seeing that negative balance made something inside me crumble. I had to push through the rest of my shift like nothing happened. Patients still needed medication. Doctors still needed updates. Life did not pause just because my bank account collapsed. Later, during a short break, I found a small card on the counter. A patient's family had left it for me. Inside was a simple handwritten message. Thank you for taking such good care of our mother. That was all it said. Nothing else. I sat down and started crying. Not because of the message, but because I felt so empty. I gave so much every day, at work and at home, and yet somehow I had nothing left to hold on to. Not energy, not money, not any sense of stability. I wiped my face before anyone saw, but I knew something had to be wrong if a small thank you card could break me like that. By the time my shift ended, all I could think about was how much worse things might get if I did not do something soon. The bills did not just arrive, they piled. They crowded my inbox, my mailbox, and my mind all at once. It felt like every time I turned around, another envelope appeared. Another reminder of how far I had slipped without noticing. The first one was my rent reminder. It was polite, almost gentle, but it hit harder than anything else. I opened the email on my phone during my lunch break and felt my stomach twist. The due date was only a few days away, and I did not have anywhere close to the amount I needed. I tried mentally rearranging the numbers, pretending I might be able to make it work, but the truth sat heavy in my chest. I could not. Then came the internet bill, the car insurance, the small medical bill I had been saving for. Each one layered onto the next, until my mind felt like it was sinking beneath the weight of every overdue notice. When I finally sat down at my little kitchen table that evening, I spread everything out in front of me. The soft overhead light cast uneven shadows on the papers, making some pages look darker than others. The room was quiet, but my thoughts were loud. I picked up my bank statements and stared at the lines of transactions, my own handwriting on several notes, reminders I wrote to myself that I ignored. Check balance. Hold off on transfers. Review expenses. I had not done any of them. The truth unfolded across those pages, not in big dramatic purchases, but in small, constant giving. 20 here, 50 there, 100 when someone really needed it. I kept reading the amounts, each one a tiny slice of myself I had handed away without ever stopping to breathe. A wave of shame washed over me, not because I helped people, but because I let myself believe it was my responsibility to keep everyone afloat. I held my forehead, elbows propped on the table, trying to make sense of the numbers. My chest felt tight. My breathing felt shallow. At one point, I opened my fridge, hoping to distract myself. Almost empty. A carton of eggs, a half-used bottle of dressing, a container of leftover rice. I closed the door slower than usual, realizing this emptiness was not an accident. It was the result of the choices I kept making, convincing myself I was strong enough to handle it. When I walked back to the table, I sank into the chair and stared at everything spread before me. Papers with red reminders, bank statements with negative balances, sticky notes with hopeful plans I never followed. For the first time in a long time, I felt the suffocation of it all. Real, heavy, undeniable. It sat in my throat, in my chest, in the center of my body like a weight I could not lift. I leaned forward, pressing my palms against my face, and let the tears fall. Quiet, slow, and tired tears. There was no one to hear them, no one to tell. No one to lighten the load I created by trying to carry everyone else. That night, sitting at that table, I felt the avalanche begin. The days that followed felt like walking around with a weight strapped to my chest. Every conversation, every request, every notification made me flinch inside. I tried to hide it, but the stress leaked into everything I did. The first fallout happened with my sister. She called me one afternoon while I was driving home from a shift, and before I could even say hello, she was already telling me she needed money for another school fee. Something about a field trip. Something he really wanted to go to. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as she talked. I could feel the frustration rising in my throat. "I cannot right now," I said quietly, almost whispering. There was silence. Then her voice sharpened. "Since when? You always help. Why are you acting different?" Her words stung more than they should have. Something about the way she said acting different made me feel like I was betraying her by trying to protect myself. I felt resentful and guilty at the same time, a twisted knot inside my chest. "I am just tight on money," I finally said. She sighed loudly. "You have a good job, Mia. Come on." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her I overdrafted, that I barely had food, that my rent was coming up and I had no clue how to pay it. But the words stayed trapped. I hung up before the tears welled too high. At home, the silence felt heavier than usual. I walked from room to room, pretending to tidy up just to have something to do. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt my muscles tense. I did not want to see another request, another reminder, another person needing something from me. At work, I was not much better. During rounds, I found myself drifting. The steady rhythm of hospital life felt overwhelming. One of my coworkers, Jasmine, asked if I was okay. I nodded and forced a smile. I had become good at pretending. Too good. But inside, I felt resentment I did not want to feel. I was angry at my family for always needing me. Angry at myself for letting things get this bad. Angry that I could not say no without feeling like a bad daughter, a bad sister, a bad person. One night, after another long shift, I sat on the edge of my bed and finally allowed myself to say it out loud. I do not want to live like this anymore. My voice trembled. The room was dim, the only light coming from the small lamp on my nightstand, casting uneven shadows across the wall. I felt exhausted in a way that sleep could not fix, emotionally drained, mentally foggy, financially cornered. I knew then that something had to change. Not a small adjustment, not a temporary fix, something deeper, something painful, something I had avoided for far too long. But I also knew I could not do it alone. The breaking point did not arrive with a dramatic crash. It came quietly, during the most ordinary moment, the way real collapse often does. I had just finished a back-to-back shift at the hospital, the kind that leaves your whole body buzzing from exhaustion. All I wanted was to go home, put on clean scrubs, and rest for a few hours before doing it all again. On my way home, the gas light blinked on. I pulled into the nearest station and swiped my card without thinking. By then, the motion was muscle memory. Swipe, pump, move on. Only this time, it happened again. That same pause, that same uncomfortable silence, that same red message. Declined. I stared at the screen as if looking longer would change it. The attendant glanced over with a sympathetic expression, and I felt the same heat rising in my face as the grocery store moment. But this time, the embarrassment hit harder. This was gas, a necessity, something basic. I walked back to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and let the door shut with a dull thud. The air felt heavy around me. I rested both hands on the steering wheel, fingers trembling. I tried to breathe deeply, but my chest felt tight, like there was no space inside me left for air. I checked my bank app again. The overdraft fee had processed. My balance was even lower now. Negative. Sinking further each time I tried to live. Every number felt like a reminder of how badly things had slipped. A notification popped up on the screen. My mom again. I did not open it. I could not. I already knew what it would say. Something urgent. Something needed. Something I would usually fix before even thinking about myself. But not right now. For the first time in years, I could not bring myself to answer. The weight of everything hit me all at once. The giving, the guilt, the exhaustion. The quiet way I had been unraveling for months without anyone noticing. Not even me. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. The leather felt cold. My breath fogged the inside of the car windows. I started crying before I could stop myself. Not the soft kind. The kind that breaks out of you after you have held everything in for too long. My shoulders shook, my chest ached, and I kept whispering, I cannot do this anymore. That was the moment it became real. Not the overdraft, not the bills, not the requests, but the truth I could no longer ignore. I needed help. I needed guidance. I needed someone who could see what I could not see anymore. Sitting there in that dim, quiet car with my gas tank nearly empty and my courage almost gone, I finally admitted something I had spent years avoiding. I could not save everyone if it meant losing myself. The next morning at the hospital, I felt like I was moving through fog. My eyes were tired, my body heavy, and my mind kept drifting back to that moment in the car, the declining card, the negative balance, the realization that I had finally reached the end of what I could carry alone. During my break, I sat at a small table in the staff lounge with a cup of lukewarm coffee. The room was dim, lit by a single overhead bulb that flickered every few minutes. Nurses moved in and out, talking quietly, heating their meals, grabbing supplies. I stayed in my corner, hoping no one would notice how worn down I looked. But someone did. Miss Thompson. She had been a nurse at the hospital longer than anyone else. She carried herself with a gentleness that made people trust her without even trying. She had this calm presence, like no matter how chaotic the day was, she could find the stillness underneath it. She walked over to my table holding her tea and sat across from me. "You look tired," she said softly. I tried to smile. Long week. She nodded, not buying it. Her eyes stayed on me a moment longer than usual. Then she said, "You have been carrying something heavy. I can see it." Those words hit someplace deep inside me. I swallowed hard, not sure if I should pretend everything was fine or finally tell the truth. She continued, her voice steady and warm. "You remind me of myself when I was your age. Always giving, always helping, always the strong one." My throat tightened. I stared at my coffee and whispered, "I think I messed everything up." She did not rush me. She let the silence stretch until I felt safe enough to say what had been sitting on my chest for weeks. "I overdrafted," I said. "I cannot pay my rent. I have been helping everyone, and now I cannot even help myself." The moment the words left my mouth, I felt both ashamed and relieved. Like finally letting go of a breath I had been holding far too long. Miss Thompson reached across the table and placed her hand gently over mine. "You are not alone," she said. "And you are not a failure for wanting to help people, but generosity without boundaries can destroy you." I looked up at her, eyes wet. "I do not know how to stop." "That is why you need guidance," she said. "We will figure this out, step by step. But first, you must promise me something." "What?" "You must let yourself be helped. Even strong women need someone to lean on." Her words felt like a lifeline, a gentle anchor pulling me towards something steadier than the chaos I had been living in. We set a time to meet after our shift. She said she would bring a notebook. She wanted us to sit down and look at everything honestly. For the first time in months, I felt a small flicker of hope, not enough to fix anything yet, but enough to make me believe change might be possible. Miss Thompson and I met after our shift in a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria. Most of the lights were dimmed, and only a few workers lingered, finishing late dinners or typing notes on their laptops. She placed a simple spiral notebook between us, the kind you buy for a few dollars at a drugstore. It looked unimportant, but she treated it like something that mattered. "Before we go anywhere," she said gently, "we need to see everything clearly." She slid the notebook toward me and handed me a pen. I hesitated, staring at the blank page. Writing it all down felt like admitting every mistake out loud. She must have sensed my hesitation because she said, "Honesty is not punishment. It is the beginning of your freedom." I took a slow breath and began. My income, my rent, my utilities, the credit card balance I kept pretending would sort itself out, and then the harder part, the transfers, each one, every dollar I gave away. At first, the page felt messy, scattered, but the more I wrote, the more the truth took shape. I had been giving so much that I had almost nothing left to live on. Miss Thompson watched me with that calm patience she always carried. "You are not careless," she said. "You are compassionate, but compassion without boundaries drains you dry." When I finished, she pointed at the numbers. "This is your foundation. Now we rebuild." She explained how every dollar needed a purpose before it left my account, not in a rigid, complicated way, but in a steady, protective way. "Money behaves better when you tell it where to go," she said. "It does not respond well to assumptions." We worked through my monthly expenses, assigning each amount with intention. There were no leftovers, no vague extra money floating around. Everything had a place. Even small amounts I set aside for emergencies. "Even $20 will give your mind room to breathe," she reminded me. Then came the hardest part for me, shifting my lifestyle. She helped me see where I could pause my spending without feeling deprived. No eating out for a while. No impulsive Amazon buys when I was tired after work. No unnecessary driving around town to help with errands that were not mine to carry. We talked through my bills next. She coached me through what to say when I called the companies, how to ask for itemized statements, how to inquire about payment plans or assistance programs. She practiced the phrases with me until my voice no longer shook. "You are advocating for yourself," she said. "Not begging, advocating." We closed the notebook only after we created a small plan to bring in more income, extra shifts, selling a few things I did not use, temporary sacrifices that would not last forever. Before we parted, she said, "Every 2 weeks, you and I will sit down again. We will look at the numbers, we will adjust, and we will celebrate progress even if it is tiny." For the first time in a long time, I felt a shift inside me. Not relief yet, but direction. A sense that I was no longer sinking without a rope. That notebook suddenly felt like the first solid ground beneath my feet. The changes did not transform my life overnight. There was no dramatic moment where everything suddenly felt fixed. Instead, it happened slowly, the way steady healing often does, through small choices I repeated until they became part of me. The first real shift came the morning after I met with Miss Thompson. I sat at my kitchen table again, but this time with the notebook open instead of bills scattered everywhere. Seeing the numbers written clearly in my own handwriting felt grounding, almost like I had taken back a part of myself I had neglected. I followed the plan we created, even though it felt unfamiliar. Every dollar was assigned. Every expense had a reason. There were no guesses anymore. Work felt different too. I picked up a couple of extra shifts that week, something I had done before, but this time the money had a purpose. I was not filling holes created by other people's emergencies. I was building something for myself. The exhaustion was still there, but it felt meaningful instead of draining. The hardest part was setting boundaries with my family. The first time my sister called asking for money, my heart pounded. I rehearsed what Miss Thompson told me, reminding myself that saying no was not cruelty, it was protection. When I gently told her I could not help right now, her silence felt sharp. She sighed, frustrated, but she adjusted. Eventually, she found another way. I realized something important in that moment. People often find alternatives once they stop expecting me to rescue them. My mom struggled with the change too. She was used to leaning on me, and I was used to letting her. But even she began to understand when I explained I was working on getting back on track. She did not love it, but she respected it. That alone felt like progress. Meanwhile, I started selling a few things around my apartment. A pair of shoes I never wore. A tablet I barely used. Little by little, the extra money helped refill the tiny emergency fund I had started. Watching even small amounts grow made me feel steadier, like I had a cushion between me and disaster for the first time in years. 2 weeks later, I met with Miss Thompson again. We reviewed everything, updated the numbers, adjusted the budget. She pointed out wins I would have ignored. Staying within my grocery limit, paying a bill early, resisting an impulse purchase after a stressful shift. These are not small victories, she reminded me. These are the building blocks of your new life. Over the next month, the constant panic that once sat in my chest slowly eased. The late-night tears stopped. My rent was paid on time. My account stayed positive. I could breathe. Not deeply yet, but enough to notice how different life felt when I was not drowning. And the most surprising part was this. The more I protected myself, the more I realized how much I had been giving from emptiness. Now, for the first time in a long while, I was learning what it felt like to give from a place of strength. The climb was slow, but it was real, and with every step, I felt myself returning. It took time, more time than I expected, but eventually the chaos settled into something softer, something stable, something I had not felt in years. My life did not transform in loud, obvious ways. Instead, the changes showed up in the quiet moments, the ones I never used to pay attention to. The first moment was the morning I checked my bank app and saw a positive balance that did not feel fragile. It was steady, intentional, mine. I felt a calm wash over me, the kind that comes from knowing your next steps will not break you. Another moment came a few weeks later when I was driving home after a shift. I passed the gas station where my card once declined, and instead of feeling shame, I felt a strange sort of gratitude. That moment hurt me, but it also pushed me into finding a different path. one that did not require sacrificing myself to keep everyone else comfortable. My boundaries became part of my life instead of temporary rules I had to force myself to follow. When my sister asked for help again, the conversation was different. She told me she had found another way before asking me. She even apologized for taking advantage of me without realizing it. Hearing that softened something inside me I did not know was still tense. My mom adjusted too. She learned to plan better and ask less. She even told me she was proud of me one night over dinner, the words quiet but sincere. I think she finally understood that my love was not disappearing just because I stopped funding every crisis. Work felt lighter as well. I still cared deeply about my patients, but I no longer carried the habit of giving beyond my capacity. I still helped where I could, but I did it with balance, not desperation. One evening, after a long but peaceful shift, I treated myself to a small dinner at a diner near my apartment. Nothing fancy, just a plate of warm food and a moment to breathe. As I sat there, listening to the soft clatter of dishes and distant conversations, I realized something important. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe inside my own life. Not because everything was perfect, not because I had solved every problem, but because I had chosen myself. I had learned to protect my future instead of pouring every part of me into everyone else. I had rebuilt something inside me, my confidence, my stability, my sense of worth. And if someone out there is listening to my story and sees a piece of themselves in it, I hope they know they are not alone. If anything I went through gives you strength or comfort or a sense of possibility, I hope you stay with me. We are learning these lessons together, one honest step at a time.